daily news program from WorldLink TV presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome to the news of the hour from Abu Dhabi Television. The U.S. Secretary of State will attend the Security Council's meeting on Friday to discuss the Iraqi crisis. France, Germany, and Russia state their objection to a new Security Council resolution on Iraq. Blair says that the date to vote on a new resolution on Iraq has not been determined yet, stating that he is confident that they will receive the necessary votes to pass the resolution. The American president condemns the attack on a bus in Haifa in northern Israel, killing 15 people and wounding 30 others. At the Islamic Conference's emergency meeting, attendees reject any foreign intervention to control the region and urge all Muslim countries not to join in any military attack against Iraq. Iran announces that it will not participate in a war against Iraq and advises the Islamic Conference attendees to unite their position and reject the U.S. war against Iraq. Now to our correspondent in Tehran, Najah Muhammad Ali.
Iran's President Mohammad Khatami fully supports the Arab Summit's resolution, which rejects an attack on Iraq. He urged participants at the Islamic Conference emergency meeting in Doha to send a message to the United States of America, saying that the Muslim world rejects an attack on Iraq.
Letters written by Osama bin Laden were found with Khalid al-Sheikh Mohammed, one of the Al-Qaeda leaders, who is now detained. The letters reveal that bin Laden is still alive and is hiding in Pakistan. This is the end of the news in brief.
The Palestinian National Authority condemned today's martyrdom attack, where 15 Israelis were killed and 40 others injured, many in critical condition. The attack happened on a bus in Haifa. The bus was completely destroyed due to the explosion. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the operation, which came 2 months after martyrdom attacks inside the Green Line stopped. Meanwhile, Israeli police reported that the assailant wrapped large explosives around his body. Adding that the number of people killed may increase. Furthermore, the Israeli government held the Palestinian Authority responsible for this attack. Now, to give us an update on the situation, we go to our correspondent in Haifa, Shireen Yunus. Shireen, can you give us information on the attack and on the people killed in particular?
نعم الحبيب حصيلة القتلى حتى الآن ما أعلن عنه من
Yes, Al-Habib. According to Israeli authority here in Haifa, 15 people were killed in this attack, and the numbers may increase since there are more than 30 people injured. More than 10 of them are in critical condition.
كما أعلنت المشافي الطبية هنا في مدينة حيفا.
نعم. Do you have any information on who's responsible for the attack? And is any particular faction or group responsible for or being accused of the attack?
Up until now, no group has claimed responsibility for this martyrdom attack. However, Israeli security sources, as well as media sources, say that the assailant may have come from Jenin, and that the Islamic Jihad or Hamas may be responsible for this attack.
جنين والفصائل المسؤولة عن هذه العملية قد تكون ربما الجهاد.
As you can see, Al-Habib, in Haifa, they are currently in the process of removing the bus.
في مدينة حيفا يتم هنا عملية لإخلاء الحافلة
Also, there's a group of right-wing extremists here inciting anger towards Yasser Arafat and describing him as a murderer. I don't know if you can hear them right now.
Islamic nations voiced total rejection of an anticipated U.S. attack on Iraq in a statement issued at the close of a summit of the 57-member Organization of the Islamic Conference in Doha on Wednesday. According to their final statement, Muslim leaders declared their total rejection of any strike on Iraq and any threat to the security of any Islamic nation. The statement called on Islamic states to refrain from taking part in any military action targeting the security and territorial integrity of Iraq or any Muslim nation. Referring to U.S. threats to topple the regime of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and reshape the Middle East, the Islamic leaders said they opposed any attempts to impose change in the region and interfere in its internal affairs. It also called on the international community to work on ridding the Middle East, including Israel, of weapons of mass destruction, demanding an end to the policy of double standards over disarmament.
If we cannot change the way which we are working in the Arab League or in the Islamic OIC, I think you will see these meetings ceremonial meetings.
Meanwhile, 57 leaders attended the OIC summit, including President Mubarak. More on the president's activities in the following report by Taghreed Hussein.
After the opening session of the emergency summit of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, President Hosni Mubarak had made important remarks to reporters, citing the Palestinian cause as the core issue that should be solved in order to achieve security and stability in the Middle East. The OIC summit started with a comprehensive speech by Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the Qatari Emir. Each of the Qatari Emir tackled the various challenges facing the Islamic world, especially in correlation to the Iraqi crisis and the recent developments in the occupied Palestinian territories. The opening session also witnessed an important recorded speech that was sent to the OIC summit on behalf of Palestinian President Yasser Arafat from Ramallah. The Emergency Islamic Summit called by Qatar, which currently chairs the Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC, it opened in Doha on Wednesday. The summit was attended by heads of state and government of 54 member states. The summit's main focus was the current challenges confronting the Islamic nation, foremost of which are the Iraqi crisis and the development in the Palestinian territories. Addressing also that important OIC meeting was Dr. Abdel Wahid Belqaziz, the Secretary General of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC. Earlier on Tuesday, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the Qatari Emir, had expressed his deep gratitude for President Mubarak's arrival to attend the OIC summit, heading Egypt delegation. And this comes in continuation to President Mubarak's efforts to host the latest Arab summit in Sharm el-Sheikh and his keenness to help in making peace, security and stability prevail in the Middle East region.
There is no doubt that President Mubarak here added much weight to the conference. The conference is, as you say, representing the vast majority of Arab and Islamic states, and the meeting was conducted in a very business-like manner. It is quite clear and evident that all the participants in the conference are concentrating on the main issues that are immediately germane to the question. They are not talking in generalities, and whenever there was any kind of diversity of views and opinions, that was straightened out in a friendly and brotherly manner. And we believe that the fact that you had 3 meetings in the past few days, you had an unaligned meeting in Kuala Lumpur, then the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, the between the heads of Arab states, and now you have the last chain, the last ring in the chain, namely the meeting of Islamic states within the members of the Islamic Conference. And I believe that the aggregate result of all of these meetings is a clear-cut preference to solving the issue without any resort to military hostilities.
President Hosni Mubarak met on Tuesday with Vice President Izzat Ibrahim of Iraq, where Egypt's head of state had asserted the importance of abiding by UN Security Council Resolution 1441. President Mubarak had hailed Iraq's cooperation with the UN weapons inspectors to avoid the US-led threat of war. The meeting was attended by Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher, Dr. Osama al-Baz, Presidential Political Advisor, and Iraq's Foreign Minister Nagi Sabri. Later in the opening session, Izzat Ibrahim, the Deputy Chairman of Iraq's ruling Revolutionary Council, spoke of the U.S. trying to overtake his country. Ibrahim blamed Kuwait for his country's suffering. Qatari television promptly cut away from the heated exchange and regained the conference later. During the opening session, Izzat Ibrahim, the Deputy Chairman of Iraq's ruling Revolutionary Council, spoke of the U.S. trying to overtake his country. Ibrahim had blamed Kuwait for his country's suffering. The Qatari television promptly cut away from the heated exchange and regained the conference later. Analysts here were considering that matter, which Presidential Political Advisor Dr. Osama al-Baz, speaking later to Night TV International, had asserted that it was contained.
I believe that we should not concentrate onto that or spend much time on it, because in an atmosphere of tension of this nature, you might find some kind of heated argument here and there. But the matter did not exceed that limit. It was contained, and the good offices of the participants in the conference succeeded in bringing this to an end. And I believe that we are back now on a start footing.
Earlier, the Ministerial Council of the Gulf Cooperation Council has expressed appreciation of the efforts exerted by United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan for his honest efforts aimed at safeguarding the Iraqi people against every evil and averting military action against Iraq. The Council also underlined the need for giving enough time to international weapons inspectors as well as Arab and diplomatic efforts to fully rid Iraq of any weapons of mass destruction. It also condemned the Israeli occupation forces for their brutality against the unarmed Palestinian civilians in the occupied territories and renewed its call to free the Middle East region from all weapons of mass destruction. President Mubarak's presence here in Doha, Qatar, attending this important summit of the Organization of Islamic Conference and heading Egypt's delegation had reflected very positively on the outcome of these meetings, where we find the stance that has been agreed upon previously in the Arab Summit in Sharm el-Sheikh was reasserted once more. Yes to respect of the international legitimacy resolutions and no to war on Iraq. Taghreed Hussein for Nile TV International from the Qatari capital, Doha.
Iraqi opposition leaders are holding a conference in Salahuddin city in the Kurdish part of Iraq to discuss the future of the country after Saddam Hussein is removed. While the Iraqi opposition is saying that any Turkish presence in Iraq is not acceptable, the U.S. envoy Zalami Khalilzad hopes that Turkey will be an important part of the international coalition to change the Iraqi regime. However, he is emphasizing that the U.S. has no intention of governing the Iraqi people. The Iraqi opposition, which have a lot of divisions between them concerning the future of Iraq, agree on one thing: the removal of Saddam Hussein. The Iraqi opposition conference is resuming in Salahuddin city in the Kurdish part of Iraq, which has been relatively independent since 1991. Originally, this meeting was supposed to take place last January, but it was postponed on numerous occasions due to recent complications. For example, All major opposition factions warned against any Turkish involvement in Iraq, saying that it would be unacceptable. A spokesman from the Democratic Kurdish Party saying the Turkish presence in Iraq may lead to violent confrontations that could get out of control. Despite this declaration, the U.S. and Turkey are signing an agreement that enables American forces to enter the Turkish military bases near the northern borders of Iraq. The agreement also gives the Turkish forces the green light to enter northern Iraq in huge numbers when the war begins, totally ignoring the Iraqi opposition. Leader of the Kurdish Democratic Party, Masoud Barzani, received big support in the conference when he called on the international community and the U.S. in particular to prevent any regional intervention in the internal matters of Iraq. Nonetheless, it appears that Barzani's call came very late. The American envoy Zalmi Khalilzad is hoping that Turkey will be an important part of the international coalition to change the Iraqi regime. Moreover, he is saying that Turkey may have a military presence in Iraq in coordination with the international coalition after the removal of Saddam Hussein. Zad is also saying that the U.S. has no intention of ruling Iraq, but it wants to help the Iraqi population to rule itself in the shortest possible way. The Iraqi opposition factions, however, fear that the U.S. will betray them, especially after hearing about U.S. plans to form a temporary military administration in Iraq. While snow covers Salahuddin city, while the opposition conference is being held, signs were hanged on walls saying, "The future of Iraq will be law, justice, and tolerance, and the Kurdish and Arab Brotherhood will live forever." Nevertheless, the location of the conference was also crowded with security forces.
Moscow's Deputy Foreign Minister Georgy Mamedov said Wednesday that Russia believes that a U.S. attack on Iraq is now likely. He said, quote, "Unfortunately, the latest indications are that a military operation is likely. We want to avoid this, and we are doing our utmost to convince the United States that there is no need to resort to the use of force," unquote. The Russian statement came after U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell said late Tuesday the United States was prepared to launch war against Iraq no matter if the UN granted its support to the offensive. Meanwhile, the world is witnessing intense diplomatic activities preceding Friday's UN Security Council meeting, during which UN Chief Weapons Inspector Hans Blix is to give another critical report on the Iraqi cooperation. But this time, the situation is extremely critical, with Powell saying that a vote for a UN Security Council resolution that would sanction war against Iraq could come early next week. Nevertheless, France and Germany continue to lobby for more times for the inspectors.
The stage is set for an even stronger confrontation in the UN Security Council between Washington and those opposing war, when UN Chief Weapons Inspector Hans Blix will present another mixed report on Iraqi cooperation on Friday. But this time, the United States' patience is nearly over, with US Secretary of State Colin Powell saying the US was prepared to launch war against Iraq no matter if the UN granted its support to the offensive or not.
This is not an easy vote for those nations of the Security Council, but the United States feels that it is appropriate to move forward with a vote in the absence of compliance on the part of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi regime. We have not seen the kind of compliance that we expected when 1441 was passed. We believe that he has missed his last chance to comply, and it is not clear that he can do anything in the next several days or week or so that would give us and give the world any assurance that he is truly trying to get rid of these weapons of mass destruction.
Powell said that a vote for a UN Security Council resolution sanctioning the use of force against Iraq, supported by Britain and Spain, could come early next week, while US officials said Washington could call off its campaign for a second resolution and launch an invasion of Iraq without UN approval. But France, backed by Russia, Germany and China, has suggested beefing up the inspections regime and extending its work at least until July the 1st. And both the pro-war and the anti-war camp were lobbying other Security Council members. France has ratcheted up pressure against military action by obliging the Security Council to hear its next report from the UN arms inspectors at ministerial level and in public. Meanwhile, top British officials seem to have failed to change the anti-war position of Moscow, and Russian Foreign Minister Igor Ivanov said during a visit in London that his country was unlikely to abstain when the United Nations Security Council votes on authorizing war with Iraq, raising the possibility that Russia could veto the US and British-backed resolution.
We cannot support a resolution, and I don't see how the Security Council can support a resolution which would in fact mean a green light to start a war. And the co-sponsors clearly said that that's what they mean. I don't see how the Council can endorse it.
If what Lavrov says will come through, then a war will not be averted, but at least the United Nations will have played its role to oppose what many consider an unjustified war.
The United States has ordered the deployment of 60,000 more troops for a possible war against Iraq, even as the Pentagon grappled with Turkey's refusal to allow U.S. forces to stage a northern offensive from its territory. More in this report.
The Turkish government signaled Tuesday it might resubmit a motion to parliament authorizing the deployment of U.S. troops in Turkey, reversing a Turkish parliament decision rejecting the authorization of U.S. troops deployment, a decision that upsets U.S. war plans. Anyhow, the United States has ordered the deployment of 60,000 more troops in a new huge deployment that will add to the force of more than 230,000 U.S. troops already in the region around Iraq, with about 120,000 massed on the Iraqi-Kuwaiti border. A U.S. defense official speaking on condition of anonymity said the latest forces would likely be used to maintain stability inside Iraq after a war. For his part, Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff General Richard Myers said that his country's forces can operate effectively in northern Iraq without Turkey's support, even if it would be much more difficult, adding that in the end, however, the outcome would be the same because the U.S. has Plan B and Plan C and D, and that Washington is always trying to plan for various contingencies. The new forces include 26,000 troops deploying with the 1st Armored Division, 24,000 troops with the 1st Cavalry Division, and 10,000 troops with the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, rising the number of U.S. troops who received deployment orders to 300,000. Also deploying were the troops of the Gulf Cooperation Council's troops and military hardware to be used under the Kuwaiti military command structure, saying the deployments are defensive and precautionary. A convoy of Saudi military trucks, armored personnel carriers and troops crossed the border from Saudi Arabia into Kuwait on Tuesday after the United Arab Emirates sent thousands of infantrymen, shipments of tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks, Apache attack helicopters, amphibious armored vehicles, 2 missile boats and support ships.
Iraq Wednesday destroyed 9 more Band Asumut 2 missiles, the largest number in a single day since the process began on March. And as a US-led war now seems inevitable, thousands of security troops and 120 would-be kamikazes marched through the Iraqi capital on Wednesday in a defiant show of strength.
Iraq on Wednesday was a scene to more cooperation and defiance, as Iraqis are aware that the thousands of American troops surrounding their country will soon unleash their war machines. Several thousand Iraqi civil defense units marched in central Baghdad in a show of force for the city's increasingly tense residents. The units were comprised of police, fire and rescue forces expected to be on the front lines during war. Also, some 120 would-be kamikazes participated in the march. As Iraqi Interior Minister Mohammad Diab al-Ashmed said, quote, "I swear to God we will make Iraqi territory their graveyard." Earlier, the Iraqi television has broadcast what it said are the funeral processions of some 6 civilians killed during a United States airstrike on Sunday in the southern Basra province. Despite the fact that war is approaching, Baghdad announced it destroyed 9 more of its Band al-Sumut Tumu-2 missiles on Wednesday under UN supervision, the largest number in a single day since the process began on March 1, and UN inspectors continued their search for alleged banned weapons. Meanwhile, a peace group calling itself the International Inter-Religious Peace Mission protested outside the United Nations headquarters against a war. Monks and Catholics took part in prayers, saying they were observing a call by Pope John Paul II to pray and fast for peace in the world.
In a message to an international conference on the Persian Gulf region, Iran's President Mohammad Khatami in Tehran on Tuesday reiterated the Persian Gulf littoral states, via adopting wise policies, can stop foreign countries from interfering in the regional affairs and thereby keep the region away from a devastating war. The Iranian Foreign Minister Kamal Karazi was also among the lecturers in the conference.
The Iranian foreign minister put forward his proposal that stipulates holding a referendum in Iraq under the UN supervision to avert war in the region and bring about national reconciliation in that country. Mr. Karazi, meanwhile, warned those who are for war against Iraq intend to remap the regional geography to smooth the ground for Israel's domination over the whole region. But as the Iranian official added, those countries which advocate war should know the time of expansionist policies is over.
Most of the participants were of the opinion that Iran plays a crucial role in helping to put an end to the Iraq standoff.
I think Iran is doing a very prudent policy by revealing its nuclear activity, by engaging in conferences like this and bringing people together. This is the only way Iran can engage, and I would hope that Iran would be more dynamic even and more powerful in the field, because here Iran has a key position in solving the problem.
Imam Hussein, Prophet Muhammad's household's third Imam, who opened an abiding chapter on freedom and valor in mankind's history books, is now talk of the towns and Muslim communities worldwide as the lunar month of Muharram begins tomorrow. Janan Saeed Tawfiqi has more.
The country with the biggest number of Shiite Muslims all over the world. The name Hussein is much revered here. The third Imam of Shiite Muslims is the only one broadly known as the Master of Martyrs. He and 72 of his companions fell martyr in the Ashura battle to uphold Islam. As the Islamic month of Muharram, marking the martyrdom of Imam Hussein some 14 centuries ago, comes closer, various parts of the country get a mournful face. Mosques, shops, and even homes are dressed in black. Open doors welcome all to join the mourners.
By sacrificing his blood, Hussein taught us the lesson of freedom. We need to convey his message to the new generation.
As the day winds down, the mourning ceremony kicks off. People get together in large numbers to hold rituals, and drums are beaten. Large procession of men in black beat on chest with hands in rhythm. Hussein is what shouted by the mourners, and tears rolled down the face.
Hussein preferred to sacrifice his blood to preserve dignity and honor, and refused to give in to corruption.
People offer food and drinks to mourners in a symbolic gesture to remember the much revered saint. The 10th day of the Islamic month of Muharram, known as Ashura, is an occasion marked annually in many places across the world. In Iran, there is a general appreciation for the epic of Ashura, with the new generation embracing it with enthusiasm. The event has always been a source of inspiration for our fathers in the past, and for our sons in future.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support provided by Henry and Virgilia Dakin.